Hey everybody, this is Perch. As many of you know, if you've been listening to the channel for any length of time, I have been an avid X-Men collector my entire life. I do have the entire series and all the comics and the spin-offs. And one of the things I feel like I could say with authority is that, you've had ups and downs in comics. It's very easy to go, "Oh man, this current run sucks." And it's like, yeah, it kind of does, but to be clear, the X-Men have had many, many, many shitty runs. People tend to remember just the glory days, and they forget some of the other goofy shit that has gone on over the years. And there's been some really, really terrible X-Men runs in its history, and a lot of very kind of strange status quo changes, particularly after, boy, I'd say when did it all go awry? Right around the House of M stuff. You had Grant Morrison and you had Joss Whedon do their things, and in many cases, Grant Morrison was trying to give a very different take on the X-Men. Joss Whedon came in and it kind of returned it a little bit to its basics, but also tried to make it kind of Firefly at the same time. And the stuff that came after it had a lot of very, very odd turns. You had the let's go put them in San Francisco, have them live on an island that will be part of Magneto's asteroid. Will be there. We'll have that. Then we're going to have the brief period where Namor's on the team, and then we're going to have the Phoenix bit, and then we're going to have the Wolverine opening a school, and then we're going to have the X-Men are living in limbo. I'm skipping a bunch of things in here, but anyway, you had a bunch of very bizarre status quo changes, and then you had them dealing with other stuff like Wolverine's dead, and now Old Man Logan is for some reason here, and we're also trying to make Laura Kinney Wolverine, but that's confusing, but we're going to say it anyway, and we're going to try this, and then Cyclops is dead now because of Inhumans gas, and then we're going to have Jean Grey leading it. I mean, there's parts of this that just went all over the effing place, and it didn't feel like anyone really stuck with anything for a while. And so you had the Krakoa era come in, and it kind of felt like Hickman was like, all right, I'm going to do what Morrison, what Claremont did, in that we're going to put a stake in the ground and we're going to commit to something. Unfortunately, I think what he thought he was committing to really didn't, the people are like, oh my God, you realize that fans are so starved for X-Men, they'll buy anything. So just crank out twice as many titles as you were planning, and we're going to milk this bitch, is kind of how it seemed to go. And then the Hickman's thing got, you know what? I was thinking the other day about the X-Men and kind of the villains, and who's a great X-Men villain, what do you do, and what's a logical good villain for the X-Men? It's machines, it's AI. It really is. And I was like, oh man, why don't you do that? You should really go all in, because it ties to the Sentinels really well. And, you could do a lot of the Phalanx to call from. Like, this would really work. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is what Hickman was doing at the beginning. If you look at kind of where that series started, I do not believe that the intention of the Krakoa era was that you're going to have a bunch of, faceless Orcus MAGA people. By the way, some people are like, why do you keep saying that? Yes, they wore red, but yeah, I keep saying it because one of the main writers for that whole thing at the end said they were an analog for the MAGA movement. And it's like, that's why I say it, because the creator said it. But anyway, they had something really cool on their hands, the Singularity, the robots, and yeah, Nimrod was in there, but did you notice that the AI and kind of all that stuff got pushed way, way back? It took a backseat to just crazy nonsense. Suddenly MODOK is one of the more major villains. And then they really went all in with like Mr. Sinister. And it just, anyway, I don't know. I have this mail. It's a really short one, so that's the long lead up. Doesn't hurt anything. It says, hey Perch, hope you're doing well. Since Marvel is canceling Phoenix and most X-Men solos they launched with From the Ashes, I would love it if you would review these books now that they're complete and just talk about what you thought of them, what worked and what didn't, etc. I may do that. It sounds like torture, to be honest. But and keep in mind, we're getting an interruption, meaning we're getting a Age of Apocalypse like event in hopes of kind of spawning some interest by canceling all the titles. But it's kind of like, you did that once, it was interesting. You've done it a few more times in other titles. It's not novel anymore. The Age of Apocalypse and what they did with it was novel. It was different. It was shocking. We're actually going to stop publishing the X-Men titles. There's completely different named X-Men titles now. But in an era where for the last 10 years or so, we reboot constantly, it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't have the same effect. I guess Tom Brevoort's like, we're going to recapture the magic of Age of Apocalypse. The hell you will. That was unique. It's not unique now. Not even a little bit. That's the problem. Is none of this is particularly new. But anyway, I think that's obvious, right? Isn't that obvious to everyone? I think it is, but maybe not. Maybe it's not. I don't. I should, you asked, so I will try and do that. But if I look at what happened with the titles and I look at it more holistically across all of them, I think I think there's two big failures in From the Ashes as a whole. There's been some creators who have done more with it than others. There's been some that have kind of, chisel out their own universe. So I guess this critique is really intended for Tom Brevoort. You were the editor in charge of the whole line. And so thus the kind of the totality of everything falls on you. So what went wrong? I think the biggest thing is it was very confusing to the consumers of what they were getting. The last we saw, the mutants were on top of the world. They were having little hellfire galas going on. They had conquered death. You had all you basically they were living on their own island, having a good time. They had kind of written themselves into a corner because Hickman never intended it for it to go all in like it did. And they did intend for AI to actually be a, seismic threat that would actually can beat them. When all was said and done, the X-Men kind of just mowed through everyone. Called the fall of Krakoa, but it didn't feel that threatening to anyone. No, there were no stakes at that point. But when coming out of that, it was like the mutants are now more feared and hated than ever. Really? Really? Because the two main titles, the Jed MacKay one, the Gail Simone one had the X-Men more or less, living up in Alaska. Yeah, they're isolated, but, seem to be doing all right. And the X-Men that are living in New Orleans, they've got the mayor like, let's name the whole city after you. I mean, so what's the hated and feared part? You've got this kind of rando group, another rando human group who is nefarious. Spoilers. And they've moved into the old X mansion and are making it a prison, doing shady stuff in there. But it's like, I don't know, they never really touched on much of that. The danger was left out of the world has never been more dangerous for mutants, except it didn't read that way. It read like, yeah, it's fine. All of them. Dazzler's out doing a concert tour with mutants. It's like, oh my God, some bigot fans might interrupt my show. That is not the same as, hey, a bunch of weird mercenaries went down to the sewers and annihilated all the Morlocks, murdered them. Like that, those are not the same thing. The Reavers stormed into the old X-Men encampment in Australia and just crucified Wolverine and just, really effed it all up. Demons came into New York and completely decimated that whole place. I mean, that was feared and hated. In this one, it's like Phoenix is off having kind of space adventures. There's just, I guess the first problem was, you're promised that it was more dangerous than ever, and none of the comics really delivered on that premise. And then the other problem was, it seemed really, readers were confused. Why is stuff happening the way it's happening? You got Magic and Psylocke in their series, but they were kind of billed as limited series, solo series. They were, had the knees cut off on them right out of the gate. You have Dazzler doing a concert. You have Phoenix out. Why isn't she with Cyclops? I don't know. Are they? Oh man, they're on a break. No, they're not on a break. They seem to be still together, but she's exploring space for why? And they give reasons in those comic books, but they're not good reasons. They're very, very flimsy reasons, and they never really sold through any of it. It just kind of came across as like, shit's going on. Wolverine's like, he's reverted to feral, except he hadn't. Over in Gail Simone's title, he's hanging out in New Orleans. So are the two writers not talking to each other? Because it came across that way. It felt like not a cohesive line. And coming off of Krakoa, where there was at least an attempt to do some cohesion, even if the cohesion was loose enough as they're on an island getting drunk and having an orgy. Now it's like, characters are all over the place. Nightcrawler's over there, Nightcrawler's over here. Okay. You know, I think that's been the problem with these books is that they seem rudderless. Even if, again, you enjoy one of them and it's a story. I mean, look, you can pick up Gail Simone's book. Gail Simone's trying to do something with that. It's like, hey, the mutants are, we introduced some new mutants. There's some mystery behind it. The X-Men are going to have to be kind of teachers, mentors. It's an opportunity for us to expand the cast a little bit. We're seeing a little bit of a different dynamic. We're seeing Rogue and Gambit take a little bit of the center stage, and it's fun to play with that relationship. I mean, she's working with the tools she has, but how it fits into the rest of the universe and how it fits with the premise of the X-Men line seems loose to non-existent. And that fundamentally is, I think, the problem with where the books are and why they didn't really take hold and why they just seem more confusing to everyone. And they wound up pleasing a pretty small group of people. The people who really like Krakoa were pissed that whole run was over. The people who like the Claremont kind of era of X-Men were pissed because this wasn't that. And so everybody's kind of looking at this like, oh, okay. And there's some new threats we're throwing at. Okay. There's 5G or 3G. What is the villain in Jed McKay's book? It's like, is this Cassandra Nova's with them? Like, yes. And here's some more mutants that are threatening, but what are they doing? Magneto's lost his powers, but he hasn't because the decay of the body and what? The books all felt as collectively, they felt all over the place. I think that's the problem with the X-Lodge and why it stumbled, because it didn't feel like anyone was really manning the show. So collectively, I think there's some people, there's people like the Stephanie Phillips book, cool. But where does it fit? How does it matter? Does it matter? All these questions do not have great answers to them. Anyway, that's my opinion, and I'll try and go back and review them. It does sound terrible, but I'll give it a shot just because you asked nicely. Anyway, what do you guys think? Fair? Unfair? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for listening.